Alright guys, I want to briefly go over with you the ways that we have learned how to solve a quadratic, and then show you another way using a particular formula called the quadratic formula. So the very first way that we learned how to solve a quadratic was when we just saw an x squared in the equation, like this example. X squared minus 50. Notice there's no other x's in there. It's pretty easy to get x squared by itself. You would just add 50 to the other side, and then to get rid of the power of 2, we square root, and you don't want to forget your plus or minus. So we're looking at plus or minus square root of 50. Now square root of 50 can be broken down into square root of 25 and square root of 2, which of course gets simplified to plus or minus 5 root 2. So that's one of the first ways that we learned how to solve a quadratic. Also, very close to when we did that, we also looked at how to solve if it's in vertex form. So we want to solve for x. We want to get this x by itself. And to do that, we would first add 8 to the other side, divide by 2, and we get 4. And then we square root everything. And again, don't forget the plus or minus. And we do that so that we can get rid of that power of 2. So x minus 1 equals plus or minus 2. So you can think of it as two different cases. X minus 1 equals positive 2, and x minus 1 equals negative 2. We add 1 to that, we get 3. And we add 1 over here, we get negative 1. So those are my two solutions. Okay. And then we also learned how to solve a quadratic if it's factorable. And I meant for this to be all set equal to 0. And that's not that bad either. You take this quadratic, notice it has an x squared and an x. That's why we definitely need to factor this to solve it. This would factor into x plus 9 and x minus 2. And the zero product property says that we get to set each of these factors equal to 0. And we get a solution of negative 9 and positive 2. Now, every quadratic that had the x squared and the x in it that we looked at before, we were able to solve by factoring because it was factorable. But not every quadratic is factorable like this one. If you have a quadratic in standard form that does not factor, then you're going to need to use the quadratic formula. And you may recognize this formula. This formula says that x equals, so when you're trying to solve for x, this will give you x, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, a, b, and c are going to be numbers, and they come from the coefficients of your quadratic when it's in standard form and set equal to 0. Okay, so you literally just look at the coefficients, put them in the right places, and simplify. Now, the upside to the quadratic formula is that it works every time. Okay, if you're ever stuck and it doesn't seem to be factorable, you can always solve by using the quadratic formula. The downside to the quadratic formula is that it's tedious and time-consuming. So you'll notice that factoring, like we did up here, it's a lot faster than the quadratic formula. You're going to get to the right answer faster than if you use the quadratic formula. The downside is that not everything is factorable. So when it's not factorable, you want to go into the quadratic formula. So if we look at the example here, I always try to factor it. I won't know until I maybe try a couple things if it factors or not. So if we just give it a test run here, if I put in a minus 3 and a plus 2 to multiply to negative 6, that's not going to add to negative 4. And even if I change the signs, that's not going to work. So that's out. If I put in a negative 6 and a plus 1, that's also not going to work. That is ruled out. Okay, so now I'm trying to solve for x. Factoring doesn't work. I've got to use the quadratic formula. So plug and chug. B is -4, so I have a negative b. That's going to be 4 plus or minus b squared. -4 squared is 16 minus 4 times a. A is 1. And then c is -6. And then 2 times a. Well, again, a is 1, so you can just write a 2 down here. And we work on simplifying. So we're going to have 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 24 all over 2. And this is going to be 4 plus or minus the square root. Inside, we are going to have 40 all over 2. Now, sometimes you're done, sometimes you're not. If you look at the square root of 40, we can actually simplify that some more. So I'm going to go up here and do that. I'm going to have 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 10 all over 2. So that's going to be 4 plus or minus 2 root 10 over 2. And sometimes at this point you're done, but in this example, we can still actually simplify a little bit. 4 over 2 is 2. 2 over 2 cancels, so I just have that square root of 10. And that is our solution. Alright, we're going to be working some more with this quadratic formula in class, so if you're still feeling a little shaky with it, it's not a big deal, just wanted to introduce it to you.